Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye Nastaprayeshu Vabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. So thank you for this opportunity to discuss this most glorious Srimad Bhagavatam, the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. So today we'll be reading from Canto 10, chapter number 15, text number 6, the title of the chapter, The Killing of Dhenuka, the Ass Demon. So again, text number 6. Ete linas tvaya yasho kila loka tirtam Gayanta adi purushanupatam bhajante Prayomi munigana bhavadiya mukhya Gudam vanepi nah jahati anagatma daivam. Ete, these, Alina, bees, Tava, your, Yasha, glories, Akila Loka, for all the worlds, Tirtham, the place of pilgrimage, Gayanta, our chanting, Adi Purusha, O original personality of Godhead, Anupatham, following you along the path, Bhajante, they are engaged in worshiping, Prayaha, for the most part, Ami, these, Munigana, great sages, Bhavadiya, among your devotees, Mukhya, the most intimate, Gudam, hidden, Vane, within the forest, Api, even though, Na Jahati, they do not abandon, Anaga, O sinless one, Atma Daivam, their own worshipable deity. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. O original personality, these bees must be all great sages and most elevated devotees of yours, for they are worshiping you by following you along the path and chanting your glories, which are themselves a holy place for the entire world. Though you have disguised yourself within this forest, O sinless one, they refuse to abandon you, their worshipful Lord. Please repeat. O original personality, these bees must all be great sages and most elevated devotees of yours, for they are worshiping you by following you along the path and chanting your glories, which are themselves a holy place for the entire world. Though you have disguised yourself within this forest, O sinless one, they refuse to abandon you, their worshipful Lord. Purport. The word Gudam is significant in this verse. It indicates that although the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his form of Krishna or Balarama, appears like an ordinary human being within the material world, great sages always recognize the Lord as the supreme absolute truth. All the transcendental forms of Godhead are eternal and full of bliss and knowledge, exactly the opposite of our material bodies, which are temporary and full of misery and ignorance. One meaning of the word tirtha is the means for crossing beyond material existence. Simply by hearing the glories of the Supreme Lord or by chanting them, one immediately comes to the spiritual platform, beyond material existence. Thus, the Lord's transcendental glories are here described as a tirtha for everyone in the world. The word gayanta indicates that the great sages give up their vows of silence and other selfish processes to glorify the activities of the Supreme Lord. Real silence means to not speak nonsense, to limit one's verbal activities to the sounds, statements, and discussions relevant to the loving service of the Supreme Lord. The word anaga indicates that the Supreme Lord never performs sinful or offensive activities. The word also indicates that the Lord immediately excuses a sin or offense committed by a sincere, loving devotee who may accidentally deviate from the Lord's service. In this specific context of this verse, the word anaga indicates that Lord Balaram was not disturbed by the bees who were constantly following him, anupatam. The Lord blessed them by saying, "O bees, come into my confidential grove and feel free to taste its fragrance." Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamstra Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamstra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyastra Krupa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'll just read the verse again. O original personality, these bees must all be great sages and most elevated devotees of yours, for they are worshiping you by following you along the path and chanting your glories, which are themselves a holy place for the entire world. Though you have disguised yourself within this forest, O sinless one, they refuse to abandon you, their worshipable Lord. So I'd like to beg the blessings of all the assembled devotees, the senior Vaishnavas, so we can have a nice discussion today on this very beautiful verse. Again, reading from 10th Canto, chapter 15, verse number 6. So, it's been a few days with the festivals since we discussed from this section, so just to provide a little bit of context for where we are. So this chapter opens with the discussion of the wonderful and exciting pastime of Gopashtami. It's a very exciting time. We know when boys, they go through different stages of development. There's rites of passages. I remember, when you're a child, growing up in the States, when you get your first bicycle, it's a big deal because now you get to go further away from the home and you get to ride and then everyone's really excited. Or when you get your driver's license, it's a big deal. And so, the cowherd boys and Krishna being given the opportunity to herd the cows and going deep into the forests of Vrindavan and exploring and playing all kinds of games. It's a very exciting and momentous occasion. And it's interesting that, in the spiritual world, though it's eternal, there's always newness, there's always freshness, there's always new activities taking place. We sometimes wonder, in the land of eternality, does things become mundane or the same? But we see that Krishna is always performing new and in different pastimes with all his devotees. And, he has really only one goal in his pastimes, and those are to give pleasure to his devotees. And his devotees have only one goal in the spiritual world, and that is to give pleasure to Krishna. And this is this beautiful, loving exchange, and it's a two-way street of selfless service and love. So we also see in this section, this wonderful description of Vrindavan and how Vrindavan is providing so many means to please and satisfy the senses. We heard yesterday in class from Maharaj, he said that Srila Prabhupada established, what is the goal of life? To enjoy. That is the goal of life. And by reading these pastimes in Vrindavan, we actually learn how it is that we actually can enjoy. Trying to enjoy our senses in the material world is a fruitless and futile effort. It always ends in misery. Krishna tells us in Bhagavad-Gita, from the highest planets of the material world to the lowest, it is all misery. Dukhalayam. So by understanding and reading these pastimes, we become attracted to the activities that await the pure devotee of the Lord, in which they can engage in the loving service. And Shukadev Goswami is revealing some very intimate pastimes coming up in a few verses. What the boys are doing in the forests of Vrindavan. We know when boys get together and they go somewhere, they don't want to tell. That's private and confidential. But Shukadev Goswami reveals the fun games and the activities and how Krishna is entertaining and providing laughter and sports for all the residents of Vrindavan. And so by hearing and studying these, we hope we can, again, purify from whatever it is that is attracting us in the material world, which pales in comparison to the bliss and happiness that awaits in the spiritual world in Vrindavan Dham. And so we have great benefit from studying these wonderful pastimes. So the chapter again is entitled The Killing of Dhenuka, the ass demon. And so this pastime of killing Dhenukasura will be described in towards the second half of this chapter, and you'll see it's sort of transcendental bowling. Balaram will be tossing demons and knocking down trees like we do, throwing a bowling ball and knocking down pins in America. There's a big sport of bowling, and it's quite seemingly mindless. You throw a ball and see how many pins knock down. But in the spiritual world, we actually have these transcendental activities which are only present also in the material world. So this verse talks about the bees, and I thought we could discuss a little bit about bees. Normally bees are something we run away from. We light incense to keep them away. But in the spiritual world, bees are extraordinarily charming, and they help to enhance the experience of the devotees. And they are devotees themselves. In the material world, the reason we run away from bees is because they have these stingers, and they might sting us. But bees sting out of fear, out of a threat. But in the spiritual world, there is no fear. There is no threat. And so the bees are simply wonderful creatures who are also rendering service to the Supreme Lord. But the bees in this verse, Krishna is explaining, are actually acting as acharyas for all of us. That are performing great activities that show us the path of devotional service. Krishna is glorifying three things in particular that the bees are doing that make them great devotees. Right? He says, O original personality, these bees must all be great sages. So what is it that the bees are doing that makes them great sages? I thought could be the topic of today's discussion. And the three things that Krishna points to is that they are chanting. They're chanting the glories of the Lord, thus making it a tirtha. They are following Lord Balaram into the forest. and they are also determined. Even though Lord Balaram has disguised himself, the bees have remained perseverant and continue following. So I thought we could discuss as an agenda today the three activities that the bees are performing that serve as an instruction and a guide for us in our practice of devotional service. And actually, Krishna explains this very directly. He's using the bees as an example in this verse, but in the Bhagavad-Gita, when explaining and describing the Mahatmas in chapter 9 of the Bhagavad-Gita, he says that the great souls, they are Daivim Prakriti Ashita, they are under the divine energy of the Supreme Lord. And then the very next verse he describes being under that protection of the divine energy, what it is that they do. And he says, Satatam Kirtayantam Mam. They are always chanting my glories. And then what else? They are Yatantas cha Didarvritaha. They are endeavoring fully. They're constantly endeavoring in devotional service. And so like this, Krishna directly gives us the clues as to what it is a devotee does. And in this verse, Krishna is establishing, again, the great activities of the bees. So let us take the first of these activities, not necessarily in the order in which Krishna presents them, but in the order of how it might flow. The first is chanting. The bees are buzzing. That buzzing is also kirtan. It is pleasing to the ears of the Lord. And we see in Nectar of Instruction, Rupa Goswami says that the essence of all advice, the essence of everything that we get in all of Shastra, it is to chant and hear the names, forms, pastimes, and activities of the Lord 24 hours a day. That is the essence. And that is what these bees are doing. They're constantly buzzing, chanting the glories of the holy name. And in the purport we see this description of the tirtha, how the holy names are a tirtha themselves. So we know and we hear that Krishna is non-different from his holy names. And exactly how is he non-different? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains in Shikshashtakam, Nija Sarva Shaktis, that these holy names, they are fully empowered with all the energies of the Supreme Lord. So if all of the energies are within the Lord, within the names, then the names must be, by logical conclusion, non-different from the Lord himself. And so when we chant the holy names of the Lord, we are engaging directly with Krishna. And we know the Supreme Lord never leaves the holy Dham of Vrindavan. So by further deducement, wherever the holy names are chanted, it is the holy Dham. And I feel Krishna is very mystical in allowing me to speak on this verse today, because today is my last day in Vrindavan. It's a sad moment of leaving this holy Dham and this spiritual oasis. But I'm reminded by this verse that actually if we take to the sincere chanting of the holy names and hearing about the pastimes of the Lord, wherever we may be, we can be in a holy tirtha, a place where we can overcome the material existence. Srila Prabhupada defines tirtha in so many of his letters and in his purports, is not just a place to go take bath in some holy river, but it is a place to hear and inquire from a learned personality about how to cross over this ocean of material existence. And so by engaging in the chanting of the holy names, which again are non-different from the Lord, regardless of where we may be, we can be in the presence of a holy tirtha and have the opportunity to cross over this ocean. And this is what these bees are engaging in, this amazing process of kirtan. In Shikshashtakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also establishes for us, what it is that it is our real misfortune. The materialists, they define their misfortune as not enough sense gratification. Not enough intoxication, not enough sex life, not enough sleep, not enough wealth, not enough that. But even in devotional life, we also identify so many misfortunes. Sometimes there's not enough pakoras and samosas and gulab jamuns in the prasadam line. Or maybe I'm not able to get this service or that service. Or this devotee is not respecting me the way I want. And so we feel all these sort of, misfortunes that we define, even in spiritual life. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells us our only real misfortune is not having a taste for the chanting of the holy names. He says, after saying in Nitya Sarvastakti, these names are invested with all the spiritual energies, but my only misfortune is that I have no taste for them. Because by having a taste for the chanting of the holy names and having attachment to chanting, one can achieve everything in perfection of life. So, these bees have understood and have developed this attachment, and we can pray. We just celebrated Lord Nityananda's appearance day yesterday to the feet of Lord Nityananda, that we can solve this misfortune, which is not having a strong attachment to the chanting of the holy names. And then we will find success in life. The second thing that the bees are doing that we see is that they are following. They are following Lord Balaram into the forest. The bees are showing us that devotional service is not a path that we carve out on our own, that we, through our own mind's ideas, develop the path of devotional service. Actually, the process of bhakti, of devotion, is given to us in Shastra and through the instructions from the spiritual master, from Guru. And it is a process of which we follow. And we see many verses that help us illustrate the importance of following in the process of devotional service. In the definition of pure devotional service that Rupa Goswami gives, he says in the second half of that verse, he says, Anukulina Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. This word Anushilanam is very, very potent. And there's three aspects of this word Anushilanam. The first is that devotional service, it is an activity. It is an active cultivation. It is something that we do and perform. The second aspect is that it is continuous. It's not something we do occasionally or when there are gaps in our day, but it is a constant engagement. And the third, and maybe the most important aspect of this term, Anushilanam, it is that we follow. We follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. We follow the guidance of Shastra, so that then we can actually make success in devotional service. And this is what the bees are doing. They are following Lord Balaram into the forest. And this practice of devotional service, it requires great following. And what happens in devotional life is, in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, it's very easy to follow. We show up at our first Mangal Arti, we have no idea what to do. We seem like we're tripping over people. What am I supposed to do when they give me the water, to water tulsi? Am I supposed to drink it, wash my hands? And we're not sure what to do, which way we're supposed to scambulate. So what do? We just follow. We see what everybody else is doing and we follow. But as we progress in devotional service, it seems sometimes we've developed the idea, oh, I got it. I know it now. I'm good. And we stop following. But actually, we learn from our acharyas, by their examples, that the further we go in devotional service, the actually more attentive we need to be in this process of following. It's like climbing a ladder. If you're on the first or second step of a ladder and you lose your attention, not such a big deal. No big deal. You'll just stumble and catch yourself. But if you've climbed 5 or 6 rungs of that ladder, and now you're on a high portion of the ladder, and you're not attentive, the consequences of not being attentive are more significant. Similarly, the consequences of being, of losing this nature, this idea of following, as we progress in devotional service, actually becomes greater. And so, if we study the activities of our acharyas, we see they have this extraordinary ability that the further they go in devotional life, the more it is that they follow the prior acharyas. Rupa Goswami gives us in Nectar of Instruction the 6 ingredients to assure complete success of bhakti. And one of those is sattva-vritti. Again, following in the footsteps of our prior acharyas. So, we can ask ourselves a question. When we are performing devotional service, when we're doing any devotional service, if we can ask ourselves one question. Under whose instruction am I doing this service? If we can answer that question, we know that we're taking to this process of following rightly. And if we can't answer that question, we might want to go and find a way to be able to answer it. Because it helps us stay on this path and assure that we can make success in devotional life, taking this aspect of following. And what is the single largest block in our ability to follow? It's our ego. Our ego starts to lead us to believe, I got it, I know it. But actually this process of devotional service is very expertly performed in this mood of following. Srila Prabhupada writes in Srimad Bhagavatam that actually devotional service not done under the guidance of someone else is not actually devotional service. It's not devotional service. So these bees are showing us a very, very important principle of this need to follow. And at the end, I'll share at least one of our acharyas who did, perform this in expert fashion of following. The third thing that the bees did is that they were determined. Lord Balaram disguised himself in the forest, but the bees didn't give up. They remained determined and perseverant in their pursuit of Lord Balaram. And this is also very, very instructive for us. One of the symptoms of Bhava Bhakti, the 9 symptoms of Bhava Bhakti, one of them is the Shanti. That the advanced devotee, they're very reserved and perseverant. And Srila Prabhupada writes in describing that the great devotee, they're reserved and perseverant in the midst of disturbances. It's easy or easier to persevere when things are going well, when we're facing lots of success. But to be of calm mind and dedicated in the process when we face disturbances, that's the challenge. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example of Parikshit Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj was in the midst of facing his demise. 7 days he was facing his demise. And Srila Prabhupada says, what was his state of mind? He was very reserved and very attentively hearing what Shukadev Goswami was explaining, and remained, determined to hear, telling Shukadev Goswami, even in the beginning of this 10th canto, tell me the details. Don't cut any corners. He wanted to hear more and more and more in the midst of great cause for disturbance, his coming demise. So this is the nature of great devotees. And for our practice in devotional service, how can we remain determined and persevere through disturbances? Well, one of the main causes of why we become disheveled, or our mind becomes disturbed, or we lose our motivation, is we forget that everything we are doing, we must be doing according to Krishna's plan. When we establish our own plan, and then we find setbacks, that leads to frustration and dissatisfaction. But if we remember, that we must work according to Krishna's plan, then everything becomes very expert, perfect. If we're working in devotional service and working according to Krishna's plan, if we find failure, okay, that must be Krishna's plan. Carry on and remain determined. And Krishna gives this great instruction to Arjuna in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita. He tells Arjuna that you be an instrument in my plan. You fight and you be an instrument in my plan. And when we become an instrument in Krishna's plan, our only worry is just to put forth our best of effort. Success or failure is according to Krishna's plan, and Krishna only has success. We only have failures in plans when we have our own ideas. So by remaining fixed in Krishna's plan, one can actually find it a little bit easier to be determined and persevere through whatever difficulties there might be. But this idea of working in Krishna's plan also sometimes leads to potential for inertia or laziness. Well, why put forth so much effort? It's Krishna's plan. he'll do what he wants to happen. So in that same discussion to Arjuna, Krishna uses a very interesting term. He addresses Arjuna in telling him, you fight according to my plan. He says, all these soldiers have already been put to death, but I want you to fight. And he refers to Arjuna as Savya Sachin, which means ambidextrous, means that Arjuna could shoot arrows from both his left hand and his right hand. And Krishna is telling Arjuna something. He says, though it's my plan, you should use your skills, whatever skills you have. In this case, the ability to shoot arrows very expertly. You use your skills in executing my plan. So whatever abilities and talents we may have, Krishna is telling us, you use them, but don't use them according to your own plan. Use them according to Krishna's plan. And if we perform our devotional service in this way, then it becomes easier to remain committed and determined in the path of devotional service, even if so-called failures encounter us. Because again, there are no failures in Krishna's plans. There is just variety in Krishna's plans. And Srila Prabhupada was one of the most extraordinary, examples of this perseverance. You know, if we are facing any difficulties in our devotional service and we're finding it tough to carry through, just read any of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes from about 1950 to 1967. And we see, the great struggle and the great challenges that Srila Prabhupada faced over and over and over again. So many varieties of difficulties. And yet through it all, he remained extremely determined, fixed on the order of his spiritual master to fulfill it. And so we can take, the great examples of Srila Prabhupada. I also thought I could share, another example. We sit today in between, the appearance day of two extraordinary personalities. One, we just celebrated the appearance of Lord Nityananda. And tomorrow is the appearance day of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. And Narottam Das Thakur also exemplifies this great mood of both following and being determined in the path of devotional service. As I mentioned earlier, all our great acharyas, they perform this extraordinary feat of following very sincerely. But I thought we could talk a little bit about Narottam Das Thakur, given today is the day before his appearance day. So we know that Narottam Das Thakur was given Krishna Prema by the Supreme Personality of God himself. Lord Chaitanya gave Krishna Prema to Narottam Das Thakur. He deposited it in the Padma River. Actually, there's a nice connection between Narottam Das Thakur and Lord Nityananda. What that prema Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was giving, when Lord Nityananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were once engaged in ecstatic kirtan, Lord Nityananda was crying in ecstasy. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu grabbed some of those tears of Lord Nityananda and he saved those tears. And those tears is what he deposited with the goddess of the Padma River. I shouldn't say goddess, the personality of the Padma River. So that when Narottam Das Thakur was to appear many years later, he would receive Krishna Prema. But when Narottam Das Thakur received the instruction from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself to take initiation, Narottam Das Thakur took that instruction and followed it extremely precisely. Now you can wonder, what was his need to perform, great activity, to persevere. He had to walk all the way from, modern day Bangladesh to Vrindavan, because he was asked to take initiation from Lokanath Swami, who was residing here in Vrindavan. That's quite a journey. He didn't wait for somebody to send him a plane ticket or a bus ticket or a first class, sleeper train. He said, no, he just started walking. And actually he started running, because this was the order. of the Supreme Lord and started running, not even caring for his own maintenance or well-being. In the middle of his journey, he fainted and passed out of exhaustion. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and gave him some milk to nourish him to carry on. And we know that Narottam Das Thakur reaches Vrindavan, and when he approaches Lokanath Swami, was he ecstatic to give him an initiation? He refused. But being determined to follow this instruction, again, he already had Krishna Prema from the Lord himself. At this elevated state, he was still following. And he went to render great menial service after being rejected over and over again by Lokanath Swami to take initiation. But he was determined to make it happen. And finally, Lokanath Swami gave Narottam Das Thakur initiation. And immediately after giving him initiation, he told him, now you go and learn from Jiva Goswami. And Narottam Das Thakur might be thinking, wait a minute, I came all the way here, I was told by the Supreme Lord to take initiation from you, and now you're telling me to go to Jiva Goswami? I can imagine, at least myself, I've taken initiation from my spiritual master, and he says, now you go go serve under somebody else, how I might feel. But Narottam Das Thakur, understanding this mood of following, immediately, with great enthusiasm, went and studied under the great Jiva Goswami and performed great activities, enjoying and relishing Sri Vrindavan Dham. And then he was given the instruction, now you go out and preach and spread these books. And what did Narottam Das Thakur do? He followed. He continued and performed the great activity of distributing books. So all throughout Narottam Das Thakur's life, we see this mood of following the instructions he is receiving. Though he was already in the perfected stage, having received Krishna Prema from the Supreme Lord himself. So he shows us this great importance in the process of devotional service, of both following and remaining determined in the midst of all kinds of obstacles. So the bees are showing us these three things, this importance of chanting, understanding what it is that is our real misfortune, understanding the importance of following, and then persevering through all kinds of obstacles. So I just wanted to conclude a little bit with this last paragraph of the purport that talks about the sinless, this reference to anaga, being sinless. And there's a reference to making mistakes in devotional service. So I have one expertise, and that is making mistakes in devotional service. I thought I would end with talking just a minute about this. So we know to err is human. We're going to make mistakes in devotional service. And the key is, what do we do in making those mistakes after making them? And Krishna tells us in Bhagavad-Gita that one who remains fixed in devotional service and is repenting, lamenting their mistake, being sorrowful for having made it, they are fully pure, because they are remaining fixed in devotional service, and they will continue to practice devotional service. But one of the things that gets in the way of us being able to take advantage of this, again, is sometimes our lack of humility. When we make mistakes, the lack of humility. I was listening to a lecture recently, and I heard this very wonderful definition of humility. There are many definitions of humility, but humility is something that, it's hard to gauge exactly. It's a little abstract. It's like, if I tried to measure my temperature, it's a number. I can see very clearly, do I have a fever or not? It's a very, objective measure. And this measure that was given, I felt, had this similar feeling of very objective and clear to understand what is humility, or at least one aspect of humility. And so Maharaj was saying that humility means that there is an eagerness, a willingness to be corrected in the path of devotional service. We perform some activity and someone tells us and corrects us. We may externally say, oh, thank you very much, Dandavat pranams, appreciate it. But what is the mood in the heart, in the mind, when we receive that correction? Is it truly gratitude? It should be. Someone is preventing us from making a further mistake. But is there gratitude in our heart? If not, it means that we have to work on our humility. Because the corrections we receive in the process of devotional service, they're only for our good. And sometimes even in receiving corrections, we think, okay, if it's an authority, someone senior to me, then it's okay. But actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shows us that even a 5-year-old boy can correct our behavior, can correct our activities. So if we approach our devotional service recognizing, yes, we're going to make mistakes, but we open our hearts and create this desire, this eagerness, this willingness to be corrected, then we actually can remain sinless in the path of devotional service, even despite making mistakes here or there, with this mood of humility. So I just wanted to end with that. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Any corrections, comments, discussion today? Yes, Prabhuji?
Correcting somebody in itself might be a sign of not being humble yourself by correcting somebody. But then, if you don't correct them, then you're neglecting your duties. So how do you find the fine line between the two?
Yeah, it's so first, we have to, understand what is our position. So if you're in a management situation, you have a responsibility to ensure that things are being carried out according to, the plan and how they're supposed to be performed. And so we have this, responsibility to correct deviations and mistakes. But it's important that our mood when we are delivering correction is pure. Our mood is not to, make somebody feel bad or try to minimize somebody's experiences or try to make ourselves feel good by pointing out somebody else's mistake. But our mood should be out of love and compassion to help that person prosper in devotional service, to help them succeed in devotional life. And so carrying out that mood of why I am, providing this correction to somebody is of utmost importance. It should be, again, in a mood of compassion, trying to help somebody. And in the specific circumstance, we must assess, if I speak to this person and I know they're not going to take that correction well, then it's better maybe that I find somebody else who can speak to that person. Because my goal, again, is not for that person to become upset or become, frustrated, but to correct. And so if I can't do it, then maybe I can find somebody else who has a better way to explain it, maybe a better relationship with that person, who can help that person understand the errors of their way and make forward. So that's one way in which we can do it, but it's tricky. It's not easy. But at least we should make it for ourselves. We should make it known. Please correct me. I know I make many mistakes. Please correct me. Wear it on our chest if we want to, because it is for our own good. And actually, if we all did that, then correcting each other becomes very easy. Yes, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. You were saying about trying to do or execute what's Krishna's plan. I would like to add that, of course, we may think that, I think this is what Krishna's plan, so let me do it. So the best way is that we can understand what's Krishna's plan based from Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra.
Yes.
And usually, Srila Prabhupada also, before, of course, he knows what to do, but he will ask some of his disciples, shall we do this today, or shall we go tomorrow? But he knows, because he's in touch with the super soul. But for the conditioned souls like us, to say that I think I know what's Krishna's plan for me, it's a no-no.
Yes. Yes.
It's not going to work.
Yes.
Because it's only the dictations of the mind
Yes.
that is telling us that, oh, I know what to do according to Krishna's plan.
Yes.
That's my comment on that.
Yes.
And for this statement that how to execute, to correct, we should correct not our false ego.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada says about management. The management is, the business of the management is to look for mistakes. Otherwise, how are we going to improve?
Yes. Yes.
And
Thank you.
usually correction is being done if you have a relationship with that person.
Yeah. That relationship's
the other
key.
person, you can slap back and forth, no problem. And he will accept. But for a neophyte, you have to be very careful not to, it's like a bamboo. And in the beginning it's easy to bend, then when it gets older, then it breaks. So
Yes.
you have to be extra careful in dealing. It's an art.
It is an art. Martha, do you have a question? Thank you, Marge. Yeah, the one thing on the plan while the microphone's going back is we should be careful. Remember, we are not the author of Krishna's plan. The plan is authored, as Maharaj said, by Krishna and Shastra, and we get it through Guru Parampara. Don't let the mind think, oh yeah, this is Krishna's plan for me to do X, Y, and Z. We don't author Krishna's plan. Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
This is in line with what Prabhu's what he spoke. So, a lot of devotees in the Prasadam world we find in Sri Vrindavan. We have the Lord there with the bhogas offered and then it's being served to us. So, so much prasadam is like left on the plate and every day it's just throwing. So somehow when I go there, I just can't see it. So, I mean, whoever I tell, they just, they defend themselves and they speak loudly and since it came up, it's everybody's hearing and it's all
Yes.
so please say something that it's not fault finding, but it's just something.
Yeah, again, if we want to succeed in devotional life, we have to make ourselves open and eager to be corrected. It is absolutely essential because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes in devotional service. And so we have to work on making ourselves, again, that willingness and I would say eagerness to be corrected. And it takes humility because it hurts. It hurts. And what is hurting? It's our pride. It's our pride. Because actually it's the greatest of help. If you're driving on the road and those little grooves, at least in America, they have these grooves on the side of their freeways. They start, if your tires hit them, they make these loud noises. They're telling us, what? We're about to go off the road. We don't become angry with the grooves. Why are they there? We become thankful. They're there. Why? They're protecting us from going into the ditch. So when someone comes and says, Prabhuji, Mataji, please don't throw away this prasadam. Please take a little bit less, or maybe you can pack it up. We should not become angry. We should become grateful. Oh, thank you. I was about to create a mistake, an offense, and set myself back when I'm trying to work so hard to progress in devotional life. So, we have to develop this. And again, this humility, it develops only through sincere chanting. It's the all-in-one process to develop this mood so that we can become eager in being corrected in devotional service. That's what I can offer.
One more thing, very beautifully you explained that that how we can learn from the bees and improve our emotional life. So another thing was that Srila Prabhupada said, another quality of a bee, that there's a crow and there's a bee. And the crow goes and sits on a stool and garbage, whereas you never ever find a bee going and sitting on garbage and stool. The bee goes to the beautiful flower and sucks the honey. So same way Srila Prabhupada says that we shouldn't find faults with each other and criticize each other because our bhakti lata reach will go.
Yes.
Yes, Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
If you agitate, the bee stings you.
That's Krishna's plan. Yes, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Sometimes I, being a very normal human being, I also tend to make some mistakes. But sometimes I tell others, no, don't do this thing, this is not right. So they happen to tell me, first look at yourself. So what should be my stand in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, we should obviously practice what we preach. So again, on the receiving end, we should take correction from anyone. Doesn't matter who it is if the message is accurate. Doesn't matter if the person telling me is doing the same mistake I'm doing, why I should care, as long as I can be protected from making that mistake again. I shouldn't care whether the person giving me the instruction is following it as well. My only goal is to succeed myself, right? But to enhance maybe our ability to be heard by others, to help them succeed in devotional life, yeah, we should, again, at least practice what we preach. It's difficult to be a hypocrite and be received in the correction. But again, I emphasize on the receiving end, we should not judge who is giving us this correction, because if it's something we've made a mistake, it doesn't matter who is telling us. It's for our benefit. Hare Krishna. Yes, ma'am? Can you, the mic, I can't. Oh, I'm sorry, Maharaj, your neck? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Turn it on.
Hare Krishna. So, can we consider that any judgment or correction comes from Paramatma directly, or just it can be in different way? Just
Any judgment or?
Correction comes from Paramatma or not?
Not necessarily. If it comes from our own speculation, then it's not coming from Paramatma.
No, somebody correcting me, so I should consider that correction came to me even from child or from anybody else?
No, we should. We have to evaluate the credibility of the correction. Someone, can correct us in something that we're actually doing, accurately. So we do have to evaluate the credibility, the nature of that correction, because it may not be just. It may not be. So we can't blindly follow it.
And we're not getting correction just every second.
Yes,
It
correct.
comes suddenly from somebody whom we are not expecting to get correction.
And it's a thunderbolt.
So when it touches heart, it burns. It means that it comes from Paramatma. Otherwise, why I'm so much hurt by it?
Possibly.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.